You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Kind of petered out at the end there. I don't like that. I'll do better next time. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I hope you enjoyed the New York Jets draft recap that I posted this morning. If you haven't listened to it yet, I highly recommend it. This show is going to be all about the NFL draft and everything that caught my eye surrounding it. So that includes trades, extensions, signings, bad picks, great picks. I'm going to be breaking it all down, and I'm going to start with a bad pick. The New England Patriots taking Kyle Duggar at 37th overall, a safety out of Lenoir-Rhyne. For those of you who don't know where Lenoir-Rhyne is, that's perfectly okay. I wasn't 100% sure until I started scouting the guy. It's in North Carolina, specifically Hickory, North Carolina. This is a guy who I had a third-round grade on. ESPN had him as the 65th best prospect in the draft. And Belichick took him in the high second round ahead of vastly superior safeties in Grant Delpit and Antoine Winfield Jr. You want to tell me right position, wrong player? Look, there's a limit to that. Unless it's an egregious reach, then yeah, you can cite right position, wrong player. Taking Duggar at 37 ahead of great talents like Delpit and Winfield? That's an egregious reach. That is an un-Belichick-like move. I mean, I understand that he traded down, and he saw McKinney go one pick before the Giants. I'm sure that's who he would have taken if he was still available. And maybe he panicked a little bit and took Duggar. But that's an un-Belichick-like move there, to panic. This guy had a medical red shirt in 2016, and last year, he only played in 7 games. I have no idea how he's going to do in the NFL against vastly superior talent. Keep in mind, this guy was playing at Lenoir-Rhyne in the SAC. I'm not even sure what that is. I'm looking at his picture right now, and I see SAC on his jersey. What is that, South Atlantic Conference? I have no idea. What's he going to do against big boys? He's going to get eaten alive. He doesn't have a good feel for the game. I hated that pick for the Patriots. As a Jets fan, I loved it. But if I'm evaluating it impartially, terrible pick. I'll move down to 48th overall to another bad pick. I'm not going to go through all the picks that I really liked. In the second and third round, if I don't mention it, just assume that I like the pick. You know, I really saved the steals for day 3. But back to a pick that I didn't like. Darrell Taylor to the Seahawks at 48th overall. The Seahawks actually traded up 11 spots with the Jets to take Taylor. They could have stayed at 59, and I wouldn't have particularly liked the pick, but I wouldn't have minded it as much. To give up a 3rd-round pick to take this guy, that's an egregious pick. The Seahawks had a terrible draft. Taylor got hurt his freshman and sophomore years. Junior and senior years played well. And it looked like he was going to have a very good grade. But then he got hurt again. He underwent surgery on his left leg in January. He didn't work out at the combine. How can you trade up for him, knowing that he had surgery? And in this coronavirus world we live in, there's no way that you could get a proper medical history. A terrible job by the Seahawks. This kid needs to put on a ton of weight. He's got to get a lot better at guarding the run. An egregious pick. The Seahawks had one of the worst drafts of any team. I'm not going to give grades right now. What I'm going to do is, you know how the trifecta was Big Board, This Day in Sports History, and Mount Rushmore? I'm going to change that to NFL draft classes by team. That's where I'll give my grades. Along with a brand new sound effect, by the way. A much better sound effect. This Day in Sports History, and then Mount Rushmore. So, the only overall grade that you're going to get as of right now is the Jets grade that I gave earlier. And don't worry, I'm not going to do the Jets again. That brings us to, without question, the worst pick of the draft. By far. Not even close. At 53rd overall, the Eagles taking Jalen Hurts with Jacob Eason and Jake Fromm still on the board and Carson Wentz still on their roster. This is a fireable offense for Howie Roseman. He had a terrible draft. I'm not saying Roseman should be fired. But that's how bad this pick was. If Roseman was on the hot seat, which he wasn't, but if he was, before this draft, Roseman could have been fired right after he made that pick. That's how egregious this was. You're going to take a backup quarterback to a guy who, yeah, he's injury prone. There's no question. But you're going to take a guy in the 2nd round to be a backup? Do that in day 3. It's what the Jets did. It's what the Bills did. It's what a bunch of teams did. There were so many better picks that the Eagles could have made. It's not even funny. Christian Fulton would have made a ton of sense. They need corners. I understand that they traded for Darius Slay, but they need more. Are you really comfortable going into the season with Avonte Maddox and Sidney Jones playing meaningful roles for you? Because I'm not. They could have even double-dipped at wide receiver. Van Jefferson and Denzel Mims would have made perfect sense. Maybe some people would have been surprised that they double-dipped at wide receiver, but it would have made sense. Instead, the Eagles take their long-term backup. What does this mean for Wentz? Is there a real chance that the Eagles move on from Carson Wentz? Did they just draft Hurts to trade him later? What on God's earth was Howie Roseman smoking when he made that pick? Jalen Hurts was a guy who I had a 4th-round grade on. I thought he was the 7th best quarterback in this draft. One-hit wonder at Oklahoma. Now, he had a great year there. There's no question. And if you want to tell me that Joe Burrow was a 1-year wonder and Jacob Eason was a 1-year wonder too, so why are you criticizing Hurts? Look, the simple fact is, Jalen Hurts is not the thrower that Burrow and Eason are. Hurts was a tremendous dual-threat quarterback last year. No question. But he's not going to be able to do that in the NFL. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Michael Vick. He's not the thrower that they are. For the Eagles, he may end up in a Taysom Hill type role. And then, yeah, a team may trade for him. Give up a big pick. And try to make it work there. But instead of filling a big position of need, the Eagles decided to take a long-term backup that they're going to hope they can flip later on. That is a terrible use of resources. Willie Gay was an egregious reach by the Chiefs. This is a guy who I had a 4th round grade on. ESPN had him as the 163rd best prospect in this draft. He was taken 100 picks higher than that. In fact, when you click on his ESPN page, they don't even give you a scouting report. That's how off the wall this pick was. I had to look at my notes to try to figure out who this guy was. He's very undisciplined. He's not a smart football player. He doesn't have good instincts. You want to tell me that Steve Spagnuolo can coach him up? I'm not a big Spagnuolo fan, to tell you the truth. I mean, there's a reason that all those teams were able to take leads in the playoffs. It wasn't because the Chiefs' offense was stagnant. I mean, that was part of it. But the main reason was the Chiefs' defense was terrible. This guy was held out of 8 games last year because of NCAA violations. You can't take that guy in the 2nd round. This guy doesn't have the talent of a Christian Fulton or a Ross Blacklock, where, yeah, you can overlook the extracurricular stuff. This guy just is not a very talented football player. I think he's going to flame out of the league in 2 or 3 years. Terrible pick. By the way, while I'm on the subject of extracurricular stuff, ESPN got a lot of heat for telling the human backstory of every prospect. This guy's father died young. This guy's mother died young. This guy's cousin's uncle's brother died young. Look, I understand why they did it. You do want to invoke the human element into these stories. But there is a limit to it. I mean, it seems like every pick had some kind of a tragic backstory that made you think it could be a Hollywood blockbuster, like The Blind Side. There's just a limit to it, ESPN. I don't hate that you did it. You just did it too much. That's the thing. Focus on the happy. Don't focus on the sad. We don't need more sad in this world. I know that sounds so cliche, but it's true. I don't want to be reminded of the bad with the coronavirus. Antonio Gibson at 66 overall was a terrible pick. It didn't fill a need at all for the Redskins. I mean, you take a look at their depth chart. You want to tell me that they're not sold on Darius Geis. They're willing to give up on him now. I understand that. And Adrian Peterson isn't getting any younger. But they still have Bryce Love, who's a sophomore in this league. They signed Peyton Barber. Very good backup. They can roll with Peterson, Barber, Geis, and Love, and they'll be fine. Instead, they take Antonio Gibson, a guy who wasn't even the best running back available, And it wasn't even close. Keyshawn Vaughn and Zach Moss, I had incredibly further in front of him in terms of my big board. ESPN had him at 119. I was in that range too. Look, he has a lot of upside. He has a very high floor. He'll contribute on special teams. You can even split him out wide, and he'll be fine. He played that role at Memphis a lot. But I just don't like the fit with him on the Redskins. They had much bigger needs. They really needed a cornerback. Cameron Dantzler would have made a ton of sense for him. Michael Ojemudia, a lot of people didn't like that pick, but I did. He was a big riser on my big board all throughout this process. I wouldn't have minded that pick. Instead, the Redskins made a luxury pick. I don't like it. I don't hate it as much as I hated some of the other picks, but this is a big red flag to me. Moving on now to 75th overall, the Detroit Lions decided to trade up with the Colts to take Jonah Jackson. It would be bad enough if that was a regular pick. Jackson really doesn't do a lot of the stuff you want offensive linemen to do. He doesn't take good angles to take on defenders. Really bad hands. I don't like his length with his arms. But you want to tell me you like his toughness, you like his positional versatility. Okay, fine. That's right position, wrong player. The Lions had a huge need at guard, so I can live with it. But the fact that they traded up for a guy that I had a 5th round grade on, that's an egregious move. Terrible job by the Lions. Jonah Jackson didn't even have a write-up on ESPN. They had him as their 109th best prospect. I had a 5th round grade on him. I was meaner. Bad pick by the Lions. I wouldn't have liked it if they had just taken him normally without trading up for him. But the fact that they traded up to take him makes that pick that much worse. Egregious mistake by Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. I'll give you some back-to-back picks now. At 94th overall, the Packers decided to take Josiah DeGuara, a guy who I had to look at my notes when he was taken. ESPN didn't have him on their final big board. They went all the way to 306. He may have been 307. And he was taken 94th overall, ahead of Adam Troutman, ahead of Hunter Bryant, ahead of Albert Okwuegbunam, ahead of Jared Pinkney. Vastly superior prospect. Rodgers needs weapons, there's no question. But an undraftable prospect? That's terrible. Look, the one thing I'll say is, you've heard of a jack of all trades. Instead of a jack, he's more of a, I'm trying to think, like a 6 of all trades. Or a 5 of all trades. You know how when you're playing blackjack, a jack is a 10 and a 6 is a 6, obviously. That's what I'm trying to do. There's some skills there that you can work on, but Rodgers needs weapons now. He needs guys who can contribute now. DeGuara's going to need a ton of seasoning. And with the lack of an off-season program, most likely, you can't tell me that that was the right pick. Terrible job by the Packers. I defended the Love pick a little bit. I can't defend the DeGuara pick. McTelvin Agam, one pick after DeGuara, was another guy who I had to look at my notes for. Look, there were a lot of people that were higher on him than me. Lance Zierlein of NFL.com had a third-round grade on him. I tend to lean more with ESPN on this one. They had him as another undraftable guy. I had really a sixth-round grade on him. I mean, the thing is, he's a guy who has really good positional versatility, and there's talent there. I like his height-weight-speed combination, but he needs a ton of work. Like 2 years to really get good. You're going to take a guy like that in the third round? I'd rather you take a guy like that in the sixth round. Let him develop. There were worse picks than Agam, but this was a really, really bad pick. I thought the Broncos had a really good draft, but Agam was without question their worst pick. Yay! I get to kill another Patriots pick! This is the last pick that I'm going to kill for a while, and it's Dalton Keene. Basically, the same things that I said about DeGuara apply to Keene. Was Keene a better prospect than DeGuara? Yes. We all know that Belichick loves his tight ends. So I can't even kill him for taking Keene when he had taken Devin Asiasi. I saw some people kill that pick. I like Asiasi. He has talent. I'm not going to kill that pick. But Dalton Keene had terrible production at Virginia Tech. Does not have good speed. I like his frame. 6'4", 253, that's fine, I'll take that. But he has no big play ability. You're not going to see him in the Rob Gronkowski role. He profiles more as a blocking tight end to me, and even then he's not a good blocker. He has to get a lot stronger. This is a guy who ESPN had as the 197th best player in this draft. The Patriots took him at 101. Egregious reach. I had a 5th round grade on him. I thought with some seasoning he could get pretty good. He's a competitor. There's no question. Has a good football mind. But to take him in the late 3rd round, egregious reach. Alright, now I'm going to get to some picks that I liked. And I'll start with the Chargers taking Joshua Kelly at 112th overall. ESPN had him as the 166th best prospect in this draft. I was a lot higher on him. I had a mid to late 3rd round grade on him. And I think he's going to fit in perfectly with the Chargers. They need competition with Justin Jackson to be Austin Eckler's backup. Kelly had a great year last year at UCLA, rushed for over 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns. He's not a pass-catching back, which is the knock on him, but the Chargers have Eckler for that. They don't need Kelly to be a good pass-catching back. I like his vision. I like his power. I like his speed. He has a good feel for the game. I think Kelly can be an instant contributor for the Chargers. Albert Okwuegbunam is a guy who I had as the 2nd best tight end in this draft. I had him as the 61st best prospect in this draft. I know that I had a higher grade on him than most, but most people had a 3rd round grade on him. Instead, the Broncos were able to take him at 118. That's insane value. According to ESPN, Okwuegbunam was the 97th best prospect in this draft. That's an incredible steal. Yeah, he's not a good blocker, but the Broncos took Noah Fant last year, and Fant wasn't a good blocker. That pick looks like it's going to work out. Okwuegbunam has a great frame for a tight end, 6'5.5", 260 pounds. Great big playability. The thing with Okwuegbunam is, in 2017, when Drew Lock set the SEC single-season record for most touchdowns thrown, Okwuegbunam was great. Caught 29 passes for 11 touchdowns. Then the year after that, he caught 43 passes for 6 touchdowns. If his production had continued going up like that, he would have been a higher pick. But for whatever reason, last year at Missouri, Kelly Bryant decided not to throw the ball to Okwuegbunam a lot. He only had 26 catches last year for 306 yards. Now, his touchdown total didn't drop. 6 touchdowns. Okwuegbunam was a victim of his lack of production last year, but if you go back in time, you can see that he can be a very productive tight end in this league. Now, with Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, and Okwuegbunam as the newest members of the Broncos, Drew Lock is going to have a field day. And they signed Graham Glasgow in free agency. They obviously already have Cortland Sutton. They have Phillip Lindsay. They have Melvin Gordon. The Broncos could surprise a lot of people next year. They could make a wild card very, very easily. You all know how high I was on Jacob Eason coming into the draft. In the mock draft that I did with Nick, I had him going to the Patriots at 23. I'm stunned that the Patriots passed on him numerous times. I thought he fit the Patriots mold really well. And the Colts were able to take him in the middle of the 4th round. Now, they're married to Phillip Rivers for this year, but the year after, that's it. It's Eason's team. He's now going to learn from Rivers and Frank Reich. 2 really, really good quarterbacks. I saw some people saying, well, what does this mean for Jacoby Brissett? Here's what's going to happen. Jacoby Brissett is going to be the backup for the Colts this coming year. Eason's going to be the 3rd stringer. He'll never see the field. He may even be inactive on game day. Then, when Phillip Rivers hits free agency, Eason's going to take over as the starter, and Brissett will be on a new team. This is Eason's team now. It's clear they don't like Brissett. You know how I know they don't like Brissett? Because they signed Phillip Rivers. Now, I personally like Brissett. I think he's a good quarterback, but they don't. That's all that matters. They signed Rivers. They drafted Eason. Jacoby Brissett is not in their future plans. Worst case scenario for them, he's their backup for the foreseeable future. But I'd be stunned if he started over Eason. This coming year, yes. The year after, no. The Colts are in a great position for the future here. At 132nd overall, the Vikings took a guy who I'm really, really high on in Troy Dye. This guy had great production at Oregon all throughout his career. Last year he got hurt. He played through pain. He had arthroscopic surgery. And that dropped him on a lot of people's big boards. But I still had a 3rd round grade on him. If you discount last year, he was a 4-year starter. 3 of those years, he had over 90 tackles. He's shown that he can drop back in coverage and impact games. He's a jack of all trades. You want to tell me you want him to put on a little more weight? That's fine, but that's going to come after the surgery, after the rehab. He'll be putting on weight. I think the Vikings hit a home run with the Troy Dye pick. He could be an instant contributor for him. In the late 4th round, 142nd overall, the Redskins took a guy that I had going to the Jets in the 3rd round in my draft preview, Antonio Gandy Golden. ESPN had him as the 83rd best prospect in this draft. I was right around that range too. I love his frame, 6'4", 223. He tore up the conference at Liberty. Had great production. I love his ball skills. I love his fire. I love his intangibles. To pair Gandy Golden with Terry McLaurin makes that Redskins offense really, really interesting. They have a ton of potential. If Dwayne Haskins can reach the ceiling that I know he's capable of, the sky's the limit for him, McLaurin, and Gandy Golden. I loved that pick. With the last pick in the 4th round, the Cowboys traded up with the Eagles and took Tyler Biadasz, a guy who I had as the 58th best player in this draft. He was the best center in this draft for a lot of the process. Then Cesar Ruiz overtook him, as he should have. I like Cesar Ruiz. But Biadasz has a ton of potential. And the Cowboys have worked wonders with these types of offensive linemen before. You don't need me to go through all the names. Does Biadasz need to improve his pass protection? Yes. But he's good in run protection. He has a good football IQ. He's a tough player. Played very well at Wisconsin. Very durable. The coaches there raved about him. He has a good frame. I think Tyler Biadasz will easily make Cowboys fans forget about Travis Frederick. And to make matters worse, the Eagles traded with the Cowboys for them to make this pick. The Eagles had an abysmal draft. I feel so bad for Eagles fans right now. How do you trade down with the Cowboys and let them take Biadasz? I mean, that's unreal. I mean, I understand that the Jets traded down with the Patriots, but come on. There at least was precedent there with Demaryius Thomas. There's no precedent for this. Terrible job by Roseman. Great job by Jerry Jones. With the 2nd pick in the 5th round, the Seahawks took a player who I really, really like, and I've heard a lot of people rave about, Alton Robinson. A lot of people close to me really like this kid. They saw him a lot at Syracuse, and I know why they like him. Very versatile player. You can put him anywhere on the field, and he'll be successful. Played really well at Syracuse. Has a great frame. Very durable player. He's not ready to be a game wrecker yet, but he has a ton of potential. In the 5th round, you can certainly grow into that potential, and no one's going to begrudge you for taking a while to get really good. This was about the range that I had Robinson going. I had a late 4th round grade on him. So to take him in the early 5th round is fine. It's not the best pick of this draft, but it's one that I wanted to shout out. The 153rd overall pick originally belonged to the Miami Dolphins, but they traded it to the 49ers so they could take Colton McKivitz. I don't want to talk about McKivitz. I want to talk about the player that the Niners traded the Dolphins, and that is Matt Breida. This was a fantastic trade for the Dolphins. We all knew that they needed a running back. Yes, they signed Jordan Howard, but they needed someone else to go with him. And it's funny, you keep seeing the Dolphins picks. When are they going to take a running back? When are they going to take a running back? They didn't take one until the 7th round. They probably thought, and rightly so, that Breida has a higher ceiling than any of the running backs that they could have reasonably gotten. They filled their other holes, and then they were able to trade a 5th round pick for Matt Breida. That's a steal. That's a great trade for the Dolphins. They easily win it. Breida has talent. He's not great. He's not Roger Craig. But he'll be a really good running back, along with Jordan Howard. That 1A, 1B setup is going to work out for the Dolphins. They'll be a decent team next year. It wouldn't surprise me if they finished with 6 wins. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Alright, now on to another pick that I really liked. Another Dolphins move. Jason Strowbridge. I had this guy as the 60th best prospect in this draft. I am stunned that he fell this far. ESPN had him as the 104th best prospect, so yeah, I was a little more bullish on him than most. See, they don't like his frame. And a lot of people don't like his frame. He's got to put on a ton of muscle. I get that. And he doesn't have the pass rush skills to be an outside linebacker. He only had 3 sacks last year. I understand that. But this kid has the motor and drive to put on a bunch of muscle. He can do it. He'll be working out in quarantine, and you'll see him at training camp. He'll bulk up. I really love the potential of Jason Strowbridge. The 49ers traded the 156th overall pick and their 3rd rounder next year to the Redskins. The Redskins used the 156th overall pick to select Keith Ismail. No one cares about that. We care about the fact that Trent Williams is finally on the move. He is a San Francisco 49er, and I really think that that's an even trade for both teams. We don't know how great Williams is going to be after taking a year off. I've said it before, guys like Marshawn Lynch and Le'Veon Bell, they just lose something when they take a year off. I don't think Williams is going to be any different. Now, yeah, he feels a huge need for the Niners. No question. Justin School was set to be their left tackle. He's not that good. He's just not. Trent Williams is an instant upgrade. I know that the Redskins were pushing for a 2nd. A 3rd and a 5th is very fair. This is an even trade. Don't expect Trent Williams to be Keith Fonhorst for the Niners, but he'll be good. He'll certainly be better than School. There's no question about that. With the 159th overall pick, the Patriots took a kicker named Justin Rohrwasser. A guy who I don't think anyone except Bill Belichick and people in West Virginia knew about. I had to look him up. I didn't have him anywhere near my big board. The best kickers in this draft, I thought, were guys like Tyler Bass and Rodrigo Blankenship and J.J. Molson. I had nothing on Rohrwasser. Literally nothing. And the Patriots took a kicker who they needed. They needed a kicker. I don't mind them taking a kicker. But they took a kicker over a quarterback. Over Jake Fromm. Now, I don't think Jake Fromm is going to be a great quarterback in this league. I think he's going to be a game manager. He's going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick. A lot of people have said Chase Daniel. I like that comparison too. I just wanted to be original with Fitzpatrick. But Fromm is better than Rohrwasser, and he fills a much bigger need. Now the Patriots basically have to sign Cam Newton. There's no way around it. Cam Newton needs to be a New England Patriot. They cannot go into the season with Jarrett Stidham, Brian Hoyer, and Brian Lewerke as their quarterbacks. It won't work. Now, I love it as a Jets fan. I was doing backflips when I saw it. But if you're a Patriots fan, you had to hate this draft. The Patriots had one of the worst drafts of any team. When was the last time you could say that? Tyler Johnson was taken 161st overall by the Buccaneers, and he was a guy who I had a 4th round grade on. I loved watching him at Minnesota. He was a guy who I thought the Jets could have taken later in the draft if they wanted to fill their defensive needs first. He has great separation skills. His production at Minnesota was off the charts. Durable player, competitive, has a good feel for the game. I understand that his ball skills leave something to be desired, but if you give him even a little bit of space, he's going to make that catch. It'll be interesting to see how he's used in Tampa Bay with Evans and Godwin and Gronkowski. But if Johnson is given a bunch of snaps, I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. I like the idea of him and Brady playing together. At 164th overall, the Dolphins took a guy who Pro Football Focus and the advanced metrics community absolutely loved. And traditional scouts loved him too. I had a 3rd round grade on this guy. ESPN had him 88th overall. Pro Football Focus had him in the 1st round. And that is Curtis Weaver. The fact that the Dolphins were able to get this guy in the 5th round is insane. Great run defender. Better as a pass rusher than people give him credit for. He had 13.5 sacks last year at Boise State. His production was off the charts. He's a durable player. He's the Mountain West Conference's all-time sacks leader. The Dolphins had a really, really good draft, and I think they're going to be the 2nd best team in the AFC East next year. I think the Bills are going to win the division. The Dolphins will be 2nd with 6 or 7 wins. The Jets are going to have 5 wins. And the Patriots are looking at a 3 or 4 win season. And I couldn't be happier about that. See, here's what is going to drive me nuts. All the Patriots fans screaming, "Woe is me! Oh, I hate this, blah, blah, blah. Fire Belichick, fire Nick Caserio, trade everyone." Welcome to my world, buddy. Welcome to the world of every other fan of an AFC East team. It's about time you underwent some suffering. See, the sad part is the Patriots are actually set up well for the future because they could be the worst team in the league next year and take Trevor Lawrence. And Belichick could retire and leave the Patriots to Josh McDaniels, his son Steve, and Trevor Lawrence. Unreal. Maybe that's what Belichick was thinking in not taking a quarterback. No, I don't think so. Belichick doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who's going to tank his season. This wasn't by design. I do think next year is going to be his last year, though. I really, really do. At 166th overall, the Detroit Lions took Quintez Cephas. Now, he's a guy who a lot of people didn't like. ESPN had him as the 248th best prospect in this draft. A lot of people had him as a 7th rounder or an undraftable prospect. But I really liked watching him play at Wisconsin. He had 59 catches for 901 yards and 7 touchdowns. Yeah, he doesn't have a good frame, but I love his production. I love his separation skills. I love his ball skills. I think the Lions may have found a late-round gem in Cephas to pair with Kenny Golladay. With the last pick in the 4th round, the Cowboys made a great pick with Biotish, and they closed out the 5th round in similar style by taking Bradley Anae, a guy who I had a late 3rd round grade on. ESPN had him as the 106th best prospect in this draft, and he went 179th overall. He's a durable player. He's a tough player. Great football IQ. Really good pass rushing skills. Had 12.5 sacks last year. It's going to be interesting to see where he plays. He's got to put on a ton of weight. He's probably going to be a linebacker. He doesn't have the arm length to be a defensive end, only 32 inches. But I think he can be a solid linebacker in this league. The Cleveland Browns beefed up their offense in free agency by adding Hooper and adding Conklin. I didn't think they were going to go with any skill position players in this draft, but they picked a very exciting one at 187th overall in Donovan Peoples-Jones. I had an early 5th round grade on him. ESPN had him as the 126th best prospect in this draft. His production last year left something to be desired, but you know what? Shea Patterson didn't have a good year last year for Michigan, and there's only so much you can do as a wide receiver in that case. I like his frame. I like his ball skills. I like his competitiveness. I even think he could be a special teamer next year as their kick and punt returner. He'll give Kareem Hunt a run for his money. That's how talented Peoples-Jones is. If the Browns want to save Hunt for the offense, let Peoples-Jones be the primary kick and punt returner. I don't mind that at all. The Browns offense got scarier by adding Peoples-Jones. It's going to be interesting to see where he fits. No excuses for Baker Mayfield anymore. The Baltimore Ravens had the best draft out of any team. And there was one pick that I absolutely loved. It was an under-the-radar pick. A late 6th rounder, so not a lot of people cared about it. It was 201st overall. But I really, really loved it. James Prochet out of SMU. A guy who I had a 4th round grade on. ESPN was a lot lower on him, had him at 164th overall. But regardless, the fact that the Ravens were able to get him at 201st overall, while all the teams in front of him made stupid decisions, the Ravens had the best draft out of any team by far. I'm looking forward to talking about it at some point. Prochet dominated the AAC. 111 catches for 1,225 yards and 15 touchdowns last year. His ball skills are off the charts. His intangibles are off the charts. He's a really competitive player. He's motivated to be the best he can be. I think Prochet is going to be a really, really good Raven. He could even contribute this coming year for him. And in the late 6th round to get a guy like that, that's insane. The Eagles finally made a good pick. It's just a shame that it took them until the late 6th round to do it. They took Prince Tega Wanogo with the 210th overall pick. This guy is someone who a lot of people, including me, had a 3rd round grade on. I don't know why he slipped to the late 6th round. He's a jack of all trades, master of none. You can live with that as an offensive tackle. You don't need to excel at just one thing. Be good overall and you'll have a long career. If Eric Flowers was a jack of all trades, master of none, he'd still be a giant. Great pick by the Eagles. It helps their overall team grade, but not by much. They still had a really bad draft. At 220th overall in the 7th round, the Chargers made a fantastic pick. KJ Hill out of OSU was a guy who some people circled for the Jets if they wanted to fill their defensive needs first. I don't know how he slipped to the 7th round. This is a guy who I had a 4th round grade on. You want to tell me you don't like his big playability? That's fine, I get that. He had less than 650 receiving yards last year. But this kid's separation skills and ball skills are really good. Everyone at OSU raved about his intangibles and his competitiveness. I think he's going to fit in really well with the Chargers. Playing with Mike Williams and Austin Eckler and Justin Herbert, he'll have a pretty nice season, I think. The last pick I want to talk about kind of flew under the radar. Not a lot of people were talking about it, but I really liked it. At 222nd overall, the Cardinals took Eno Benjamin, a running back out of ASU. This guy had really good production there, over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. He's really short, though. Only 5'9", a shade over 200 pounds. That's what knocked him down a lot of people's boards, but he's shifty. Very fast, great agility, great acceleration. He could be a solid backup for Kenyon Drake this year, and if he flames out, which is very possible, watch out for Benjamin to take over. Realize the Cardinals have found money in the past with running backs, cough, cough, David Johnson. They could do it again with Benjamin. One more point on the NFL draft, and then I'll move on to some of the other news. The Carolina Panthers, led by Matt Rule, the alleged offensive guru, went all defense. They didn't make a single offensive pick. They really needed to improve the interior of their offensive line, especially after losing Greg Van Roten. They needed more defense than offense, there's no question, but it's very curious that they took all defense, especially when they're led by a Sean McVay type. Very, very surprising. That's going to knock their grade down. Alright, I do want to talk about the Marquise Goodwin trade. I didn't do it when I was going through the draft because I wasn't sure how to do it with the pick swap that was there. So I'll talk about it now. Obviously, he was traded to the Eagles. I love that move for him. With him, Deshaun Jackson, and Jalen Reagor, they now have the fastest wide receiver group in the NFL. I'm not a big Goodwin fan, but if anyone can get something out of him, it's Doug Peterson. I think Peterson's a really underrated coach. I don't think Goodwin will be great for him, but if he stays healthy, it wouldn't surprise me if he had 500 yards. Maybe 5 or 6 touchdowns, 50 catches. Somewhere around there. That'd be nice. I would take that. It doesn't help their team draft grade, though. They're going to get a terrible grade from me at some point. I really want to talk about a couple signings, and I'll start with the Texans extending Laramie Tunsil for 3 years at $66 million. I mean, that is insane. That is staggering. That is unreal. Whatever adjective you want to use. That's okay. I don't mind it. The one thing you have to say is, though, it makes sense for the Texans. Is it an overpay? You can certainly make that argument. But the Texans had to bring him back after having such a criticized offseason. They couldn't afford to see the stories about is Tunsil going to resign? Are they going to have to franchise tag him? All that good stuff. And Tunsil just blew up the O-line market. Before him, the richest contract for an offensive lineman in terms of AAV was Lane Johnson at $18 million a year. Tunsil shattered that by $4 million. I like Tunsil a lot. He's a great player. This is an overpay, though. There's no question. The Texans are going to need to win for this to work. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give it a 7. I like it. I don't love it. It's a huge overpay. It's an egregious overpay for a team that has done nothing in the playoffs. They've got to win some playoff games to make this contract work. It's just that simple. I do really want to talk about the Saints signing Jameis Winston and extending Taysom Hill. At the time I'm recording this, Winston's contract isn't known. Hill's extension is 2 years, $21 million. Now, when I first saw that the Saints signed Winston, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. But then I thought about it. Taysom Hill is a dynamic weapon on offense. Now, let's say Drew Brees gets hurt. Sean Payton doesn't want to lose that weapon in Hill. Hill would have to slide over to quarterback, and then you're losing his Wildcat role. By signing Winston and having him as the primary backup, you'll never lose Hill's Wildcat ability. Is it a questionable use of resources? Yes. But if the Saints are gung-ho on having Hill as the starter next year, you can't hate it. They locked him up to a very reasonable rate for next year. This year, egregious overpay. Next year, not so much. And maybe there will be a quarterback competition with Hill and Winston. I don't see it, though. I think they're going to give Hill the reins and watch him go. They've been gearing up for that for a while. I don't like that decision, but I think it's what they're going to do. If they want to bring Winston back for not this coming year, the year after, they certainly can, but I think they'd give Hill the leg up on that quarterback competition that may or may not happen. Moving on now to the Seahawks cutting DJ Fluker, and I think this is a really good move for them. Ever since Fluker left the Chargers, he's been a shell of his former self. Was terrible with the Giants, has been terrible with the Seahawks. He's just not a good starter in this league. The Seahawks also drafted his heir apparent in Damian Lewis in the 3rd round with the 69th overall pick. Nice. Lewis is a guy who did really well against great SEC competition. Held his own against Raekwon Davis, held his own against Derek Brown. That bodes well for his future in this league. It's not enough to just play in the SEC. You have to play well in the SEC. The fact that he played that well in those conference games means a lot to me. All in all, really good decision by the Seahawks to move on from Fluker. I wasn't crazy about their draft. In fact, I strongly disliked it, as you could tell, but it makes sense to move on from Fluker, and Lewis should be a solid replacement. Tomorrow, you may get the new trifecta, depending on whatever breaks in the world of sports. Maybe we'll get some news on when the leagues are going to reopen. It seems like the NBA is gearing up for it a little bit. Here's hoping we can get some normalcy back. Like I've been saying for a while, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that Dr. Bobby Brown reminds me of a fellow who's been hitting for 12 years and fielding one.